It is December 6, 1912. For a year, a team of German Egyptologists, led by Ludwig Borchardt, has been excavating the remains of a lost city, 350 kilometers from Cairo, in the heart of Egypt, the former capital of Pharaoh Akhenaton and his wife Nefertiti.
They discover a rich residence, the luxurious villa where the chief sculptor Thutmose lived, who was tasked by the royal couple to create their official portrait.
This team enters in a completely mysterious place that is not yet known, which is the workshop of the famous Thutmose. Imagine the emotion of these German archaeologists. They are about to discover a bust.
The bust was buried in the sand, and Ludwig Borchardt gradually uncovered it.
Astonishment, absolute enchantment. It represents a woman of stunning beauty. The men present are in a state of intense emotion.
Ludwig Borchardt immediately realized that he was facing an exceptional discovery due to the state of preservation.
This limestone and stucco bust, with colors barely faded, modeled by the great sculptor of the royal family, Thutmose, is photographed by the fascinated excavation team.
It is extremely vibrant, alive. It feels like the Queen is right in front of you.
It's a fabulous discovery. This bust is said to be that of the most sublime Queen of Egypt, the very mysterious Nefertiti.
Before the discovery of the bust, the name of Nefertiti was known to Egyptologists, historians, and specialists, but it is truly this extraordinary work that made Nefertiti universally known. Nefertiti becomes a sort of icon.
Newly revealed icon, this face unearthed from the sands finally allows us to visualize the extraordinary appearance of the Queen and her origins.
We discover something that looks extremely lifelike. This bust is very precise. Thutmose, the sculptor, wanted to make it as realistic as possible. When you look closely, you can see that he worked hard on the modelling of the face.
Her eyes are also made up, outlined with black makeup, black coal. The eyebrows have also been redrawn. Only one eye was inlaid with rock crystal, the other eye was never set.
Usually in art, there are always conventions. Often, women are depicted with lighter skin than men, generally leaning towards yellow tones, while men are represented with red tones. Here, we have a Nefertiti, whose skin is tinted with ochre, and we really get the feeling that they wanted to get as close as possible to the natural complexion of her skin. She must have had coppery, tanned skin.
She is an Egyptian beauty, a very African beauty. She has a dark complexion.
Her very distinctive headdress provides information about the extent of what must have been her power more than 3,500 years ago.
A headdress that is quite unusual for women, since she actually wears a crown, which is a pharaonic attribute. A rather tall blue headdress decorated with a uraeus.
Uraeus in Egyptian, or Aureus, is a feminine deity. She is both the daughter and the eye of the great sun god, whose function here is to protect the queen's forehead.
If the aristocratic bearing and the finesse of the bust have continued to captivate since its discovery, the perfection of the features, so rare in reality, casts doubt on the faithful representation of what would have been the Queen's face.
Must we had fun measuring the bust, of course. And we found that each part of the face was remarkably balanced.
If we look at the placement of the eyes, the placement of the nose, the symmetry of the face, which is very, very rare in a real face, it is a perfect portrait. All of this corresponds to the standards of beauty and ideal for the ancient Egyptians.
That does not mean that Nefertiti did not have features that generally matched this representation, this bust, but she is still strongly idealized.
In a way, the sculptor Thutmose is the Photoshop of antiquity. He made Nefertiti perfect.
Nefertiti appears for the first time in our sources at the time of her marriage to the young Amenhotep IV. It is the end of year 3 or the beginning of year 4 of her husband's reign. They are between 13 and 14 years old. It should be noted that at the time there wasn't really adolescence as we understand it today. One goes directly from childhood to adulthood. Girls are married as soon as they have their first period, or even sometimes before. And so we are really dealing with a very, very young couple.
And we can imagine that this closeness in age contributed to creating a certain complicity, a tenderness between them.
It is at this same time that the name of Nefertiti appears for the first time on a lintel of the Karnak temple, now displayed at the Louvre Museum. An official presentation, in a way, decided by the sovereign, newly married.
Queen Nefertiti has her name inscribed here in a cartouche. The cartouche is this oval that contains royal names. Nefertiti means the beautiful one has come. We do not know if it is her birth name or a name given to her at her accession, and it does not really matter. What matters is what it defined. It is the name in the cartouche, preceded by the very important epithet Hemet Nesut Uret in Egyptian, which means the great wife of the king or great royal wife.
Nefertiti is clearly a name that is related to the goddess Hathor, a traditional Egyptian goddess, often depicted in the form of a cow, because the cow symbolizes femininity, fecundity, fertility, extremely positive things for the Egyptians. And Nefertiti will indeed play this role alongside the pharaoh, a sort of feminine stimulant for her husband.
Native of Egypt, the beauty among beauties would be part of the same family as that of the pharaoh.
Obviously, Amenhotep IV and Nefertiti are cousins. That seems the most likely. Nefertiti is probably the daughter of Ai, a very important figure at the court, who is likely the brother of Queen Tiye, wife of Amenhotep III and mother of Amenhotep IV.
His father, Ai, is a high-ranking cavalry officer, certainly, and a great dignitary of the court, and their families are very close. It is natural to marry among themselves among the pharaohs. They keep power within the family, and incest is something extremely common. For the pharaohs, power is almost divine. If they are pharaohs, it is because the gods willed it. So, there is no question of mingling with a whole bunch of other people who might claim power. So, for that reason, a pharaoh marries only the people who are worthy, that is to say, his sisters, possibly his cousins. It is even quite common for a pharaoh to marry his daughters when he has lost his wife.
Barely on the throne, a first depiction already shows the new queen as the Egyptians imagine the deities, a representation that unfortunately has not survived the passage of centuries.
So, here we are in the tomb of one of the most important figures of the kingdom, the Vizier Ramose. And we have an exceptional depiction, as we have the first representation of Queen Nefertiti.
Here is very interesting depiction where we see this young couple during an appearance, as was done at the time, from the balcony of the royal palace. First, there is the young pharaoh, and in the second position, behind the pharaoh, stands, we could say, the number 2 at the head of the pharaonic state, the Queen Nefertiti.
To be pharaoh and queen of Egypt, in antiquity, is to be considered as gods on earth, incarnate deities who are continuously worshipped.
The king acts like a god on earth. He is the only human being authorized to interact with the divine.
The king himself merges with the god Horus. Horus is the last representative of the divine dynasty that is believed to have ruled the earth before the pharaohs. The pharaoh is the incarnation of Horus on earth.
The king must present offerings to the gods. He must build temples. He must also, and this is where it touches a little on the military and political domain, expand the borders of Egypt. And if he does not do this, he can be considered a bad king. But a priori, a king is inspired by divinity, so he is judged as somewhat infallible.
But at the same time, the pharaohs were regularly assassinated, which shows that the Egyptians were perfectly aware that they are mortal and that they are human beings.
Nefertiti and her husband, according to tradition, must be noticed from afar. Like all the kings and queens of Egypt, they display attributes characteristic of their divine status.
Pharaonic crowns are quite extraordinary. These crowns must have been 40 or 50 centimeters high, extending the head of the king and queen symbolically towards the sky, precisely to connect this pharaoh and queen with the gods.
During ceremonies, he also wears other attributes such as the false beard that imitates the beard of Osiris.
He also carries the crook, the Heka scepter in Egyptian, which is a kind of hieroglyph meaning to govern, and the flail, which also refers to his sovereign authority.
As for the queen, she may have a kind of fly whisk, a symbol of her authority.
Incarnation of the gods. It is often difficult to freely approach the queen and the king, even during private audiences.
Everyone bows in their presence, everyone bows. Some even lie down on the ground. You cannot kiss the pharaoh's feet because, as he is an incarnate god, it is not possible, but you kiss the ground.
The Egyptian civilization is based on a word, which is the word hierarchy.
At the top of this hierarchy, at the head of a vast territory, the pharaoh rules. He is surrounded by a crowd of high officials led by the prime minister of the time, a vizier. They all form a category of privileged individuals, that of dignitaries with almost hereditary positions. At the bottom of the social pyramid, far from the eyes of the pharaoh and the queen, live the peasants. The scribe, on the other hand, privileged among the privileged, enjoys exceptional power and prestige.
We all have in mind the image of the scribe sitting cross-legged, holding papyrus and a reed pen in front of him.
Ancient Egypt is an extremely bureaucratic society. Everything is written down, everything is noted.
For example, recording property transfers, inheritances, bequests. Scribes are indispensable. They are everywhere in Egyptian society and ensure its proper functioning.
At the time when Nefertiti and her husband Amenhotep IV, the future Akhenaton, come to power, Egypt has never been so rich and splendid. We are in the New Kingdom, 1,300 years after the construction of the pyramids, 1,300 years before the reign of Cleopatra.
We are at a time when Egypt truly has an empire that stretches from Nubia in present-day Sudan to the Syrian-Turkish border, meaning an immense area of control. So Egypt really dominates the world.
It is an extremely prosperous country that draws a lot of wealth from the Nile, obviously, from its mines as well, and from all the conquests it has been able to carry out on the eastern shore of the Mediterranean.
9 generations of pharaohs succeeded one another before Nefertiti, all from this new empire. Some left an exceptional mark and monuments still visible when the most beautiful of the beautiful became queen.
As Egypt somehow preserves the memory of the ancient pharaohs, the great ancestors watch over the new rulers as tutelary figures with whom, of course, they have to reckon.
There were great figures of ancient Egypt who remained in memory. King Thutmose III, who reigned for a very long time, and who has greatly expanded the sphere of influence of Egypt. And then, we also have remarkable women. At the beginning of the reign of Thutmose III, we have Queen Hatshepsut.
Hatshepsut was able, as a woman, to ascend to the throne and maintain her position. It is certainly an example that the very young Nefertiti can contemplate, since she is a pharaoh.
Queen Tiye is a model for Nefertiti. She is a queen who married very, very young, which was not common at the time. She must have been 8 or 9 years old when she married Pharaoh Amenhotep III, who was about the same age. She was not, strictly speaking, from the royal family. One could say she was a commoner.
Tiye is the great royal wife. This means she holds the position of queen. She is the first wife. Amenhotep III has different wives, but she stood out from the others. She is the closest to the king and is the one presented to the people as the queen.
It is known from the diplomatic correspondence of the time of Amenhotep III that Queen Tiye could have played a diplomatic role, a political role, as she was in contact with other sovereigns, partners of the King of Egypt.
An influence at the royal court, and alongside her husband, who seems to gain considerable importance throughout the reign. One of the most beautiful testimonies is found at the Cairo Museum, with its 2 colossal statues of 7 meters that dominate the atrium. A presentation of the royal couple intended to be spectacular by the pharaoh.
What is really crucial here is that Queen Tiye is depicted the same size as her husband, which is truly exceptional. Previously, this never happened. The queen was always represented smaller. Here, it really highlights her crucial role at the royal court and alongside her husband, Amenhotep III.
This influence over the king strikes the young Nefertiti very early, as certainly does the aesthete and Epicurean personality of the pharaoh. Amenhotep III is a ruler who intends to make a kingdom already at the height of its glory prosper.
One must imagine that he lived at a time when the Egyptian borders were at their maximum. So the empire was gigantic, and he cultivated his diplomatic ties with neighbouring peoples by marrying princesses from other kingdoms. Thus, he formed a gigantic harem in this way.
He has hundreds, even 1,000 women in his harem, so he is often depicted, which is not necessarily false, as a sort of collector of women, spending his time in his harem, a harem that does not necessarily have only a sexual purpose. It is a kind of private club for the pharaoh, where the pharaoh goes to have fun.
I think he is an extraordinarily intelligent man who very early on made the connection between beauty and divinity. That is to say, praising the gods involves precisely an extraordinary aesthetic. It is, in a way, entrusting the divine language with the most precious elements and materials.
Given the wealth he possesses, Amenhotep III was able to embark on truly pharaonic construction programs. He modified the monumental landscape of ancient Egypt by building temples like never seen before.
The pharaoh leads a vast construction program that sees the emergence of temples dedicated to many deities throughout the Nile Valley. In Thebes, his capital, he even orders the construction of a vast sanctuary that is today called the Luxor Temple.
The court of Amenhotep III in the Luxor Temple is particularly spectacular. One must imagine these columns that supported a ceiling and formed a portico that framed the court in a majestic manner. Today, the architecture appears much more airy as the walls that bordered the portico have disappeared. These columns are shaped like papyrus. In the temple's symbolism, the columns represented the plants emerging from the land of Egypt. Amenhotep III introduced into the temple a colossal, grandiose architecture. as seen with these columns that measure about 20 meters in height, which are overwhelming, and were the majestic entrance to this enclosed courtyard.
It is in a residence built in Thebes by this aesthete king, the Palace of Malkata, that the future husband of Nefertiti spends a large part of his childhood.
Little is known about the childhood of Prince Amenhotep IV. It is known that he is one of the last, if not the last of the siblings, which includes 4 sisters and an older brother. Therefore, he was not destined for the throne. In the line of succession before him was a prince named Thutmose, who should have been the 5th of that name.
Does that mean he would have received a less important education? I don't think so, as the Egyptian court has the means, I would say, to provide each little prince with a cohort of scholars, tutors, people who oversee his education.
Nefertiti probably grew up at the pharaonic court as well. She must have been one of those women who gravitated around the harem, and since this place was not closed off, it is more than likely that she met Amenhotep IV at a very young age.
Nefertiti, like Amenhotep, does not mingle with the common crowd, as one might dare to say at the time, meaning the peasants. They both lived a highly protected childhood. They do not breathe, up to that point, the same air as the commoners. They do not eat, of course, the same food. Everything is done so that this divine flesh, in a way, is truly exalted.
But a tragic event disrupts the carefree life of young Amenhotep. His older brother, Thutmose, suddenly disappears.
In fact, the young Amenhotep IV is propelled to the top of the hierarchy.
He will become pharaoh, even though his destiny, initially, did not lead him there at all.
The future heir has little time to train with his father. Nevertheless, he attends the last construction site of the builder king, that of a majestic funerary temple, the largest that ancient Egypt has known. Located on the west bank of the Nile, it has now disappeared. Only 2 great colossi still mark the former entrance.
Behind me are the colossi known as Memnon, which actually represent King Amenhotep III, seated on a throne, guarding the entrance to the first pylon of the temple. Each colossus is a monolith of 800 tons and about 20 meters in height. They are the largest currently in Egypt. Amenhotep had these colossi transported over the 700 kilometers between Cairo and here, Thebes, via the Nile, and against the current. It's quite a difficult task, but they accomplished it wonderfully.
An extraordinary transport that was not limited to these 2 colossi. In 20 years of excavations, the Egyptologist Hurig Saruzian has unearthed many other statues of the pharaoh on this site. 2 of them reveal an unexpected aspect of the king.
Everywhere else, the colossi depict him with youthful features, eternally young, smiling. But not here. The king has aging features. It is the old king who has been represented here, the aged king. One can imagine that it is the end of the reign now, so it is the end of the great adventure of constructing this gigantic temple. And the king, with his aging features, marks the end of this reign, I would say.
This funerary temple will be his last great achievement. After 38 years of reign, Amenhotep III passes away.
His son, Amenhotep IV, who ascends to the throne, conducts his father's funeral, and it is also a way to show that he is the legitimate heir of the pharaoh. So he organizes the procession that leads Amenhotep III to the Valley of the Kings, since it is there that this pharaoh had arranged his tomb.
One can imagine the anxiety gripping the heart of this young prince when he becomes pharaoh. The burden is overwhelming.
Amenhotep IV is very young. He's only about 12 years old. Obviously, he was not left completely alone in power. Even though his father has already prepared him to take over, there are still very strong figures around him, like his mother, Tia, and also I, the father of Nefertiti.
To establish his power, the very young pharaoh immediately honors the gods and follows the pure tradition of builder kings. On the advice of his mother, Tia, he begins work in a highly symbolic place, the Temple of Karnak. A massive entrance was erected there by his father. To honor him, Amenhotep IV chooses to add a foregate, which he decorates. A remnant still visible today.
Behind me, you can see a relief that Amenhotep IV dedicated to the god Amun at the beginning of his reign, as was customary. The relief depicts a completely traditional scene, the symbolic slaughter of enemies, where we see the king grabbing a bunch of prisoners by the hair and striking them on the head with his club. Amenhotep IV still fully adheres to tradition. He takes up themes that have existed since the beginning of Egyptian royalty.
But after 3 years of reign, the young pharaoh still does not have a great royal wife. Attention then turns to Tia's niece, the young Nefertiti.
Tia has a very real influence on the union of Amenhotep with this young girl, whose stunning beauty she must have first noticed, but also her intelligence and will.
Nevertheless, it must be difficult for Nefertiti at first to compete with the charismatic power of her mother-in-law. So, she needed to gradually assert herself on the power scene, and she did so by weaving a very close, intimate relationship with Amenhotep IV, who eventually gave more and more space to his wife and relegated his mother somewhat to the background of the harem.
This marriage also marks a major turning point in the reign of the young pharaoh, as together, they chose to disrupt the millennia-old cults of all the gods of Egypt. In the 7th year of the reign of the beautiful Nefertiti and Amenhotep IV, Egypt is going through an unprecedented crisis. The pharaoh has just renounced the main deity of his empire.
He has the statues of Amun destroyed, which means they want to completely eradicate the existence of a god.
It is a symbolic persecution against Amun, against the name of Amun.
The goal for him is truly to wipe the slate clean of the past and impose a new religious vision.
But what happened for the royal couple to decide to break with the ancestral traditions of the country? Millennia-old beliefs, with an impressive number of deities preserving Egypt from chaos. A pantheon dominated by an all-powerful god, the mysterious Amun.
The god Amun, since the Middle Kingdom, is the god who protects royalty. He is responsible for designating the legitimate king, therefore he was favored by each pharaoh.
His name means the hidden one, because Amun is a god who is hidden in the sky. His body is often depicted in blue because it blends with the sky, but he can also reside inside his cult statue, which is a true idol in that sense. It's not just a representation, a work of art. It is believed that the divine power can truly inhabit it.
Imploring the favor of the deity is a privilege reserved for pharaohs. But to ensure daily worship in all the temples of the kingdom, The sovereign delegates this task to the priests. On the west bank of Luxor, Pharaoh Queen Hatshepsut, the illustrious ancestor of Amenhotep IV and Nefertiti, built a mortuary temple dedicated to the god Amun. It still retains today all the characteristics of the sanctuaries of that time.
The courtyard of the Temple of Hatshepsut, where we are currently located, was, like the rest of the monument, inaccessible to the public. Egyptian temples were not made to receive worshippers like a church or a mosque. There was another purpose in these temples, which was to maintain the divine statue.
The idol that is worshipped is carefully kept in the Holy of Holies, at the back of this courtyard. Through this portico, the priests access the last room, built in a particularly codified style.
We see how the architecture is designed where the floor rises towards the sanctuary, the ceiling lowers, and thus we reach the point of contact between the earth where humans live and the sky where the gods reside. This point of contact is the horizon where the chapel of the god Amun is located, which contains the divine statue. The sanctuary also has the particularity of being plunged into total darkness to protect the god from evil forces.
A mysterious place where only the pharaoh or his representative, the high priest, can enter to speak to the deity.
The sanctuary is decorated with painted reliefs showing a scene of offering. The king is kneeling with 2 wine vases in his hands, which he is presenting to the god Amun. So, this is one of the elements that actually illustrate this daily worship that was performed to the statue of the god. Every morning, at dawn, the high priest knocks on the doors of this small chapel to awaken the god Amun, bringing his spirit back down from the sky during the night. Once the god is awake, he opens the doors and performs the cleansing of the statue.
The statue receives a breakfast in the morning, is dressed, and receives ointments and cosmetics just like the body of a real person.
They also organize entertainments for the god. It is the role of the priestesses. They sing, they dance. They even have contact, it seems, with the idol of the god to excite him, so that he does not lose his vitality, his omnipotence, since he is a great creator god. This divine power must be maintained, hence the role of the priestesses, who are the god's wives.
With all these special attentions given to the god Amun, the clergy also, over time, strengthens its power. The Temple of Karnak is the main sanctuary of the deity. It then becomes a true state within the state, administered by the high priest.
The high priest is also a kind of big boss, a CEO. He manages extremely diverse and very material activities. There are notably territories exploited by the clergy with extremely important agricultural resources. There are also craft workshops, breweries, bakeries. You can even hire singers, musicians for banquets. You can hire mourners for funerals. And in some temples, there were even prostitutes. So all means are good for the clergy to increase its wealth.
These priests, who have staggering resources, ultimately do whatever they want. It is an exceedingly important counterpower that the pharaohs were forced to reckon with throughout their entire reign.
This power of the clergy of Amun is at its zenith at the beginning of the reign of Amenhotep IV. It might even be capable of overthrowing him.
It seems that his legitimacy was questioned and that he decided to place himself under the protection of a deity to which only he has access, of which he is the sole spokesperson, so that his legitimacy as a sovereign could no longer be questioned.
The name Aten is already known. It is an Egyptian term, a common name that refers to the solar disk as it appears on the horizon in the sky.
This famous solar disk, which is an absolute certainty in Egypt, how indeed can one ignore the sun in such a country? It is both capable of making crops grow and of burning them as well. It is therefore a principle of life and death. Well, this solar disk truly becomes an obsession for the young pharaoh. He places Aten at the center of his own heart.
A radical change for the entire Egyptian population. In the Valley of the Nobles, Ramos, the king's vizier, decorated his tomb throughout his life. Walls with exceptional decorations, a rare testimony of the transition between the two beliefs.
On this scene to the left of the passage, one can see a depiction of Amenhotep IV, still represented in a traditional manner, seated, truly wearing all the insignia of royalty, and just behind him, also seated on a throne, the goddess Ma'at, who truly belongs to the pantheon of polytheistic Egyptian gods, and is depicted with a feather on her head.
And when the beliefs change, the high dignitary also adopts the new faith of the royal couple.
On the right side of the passage, we see a scene that became truly traditional for the period of Amenhotep IV. That is the god Aten, spreading his benevolent rays over the royal couple Amenhotep IV and Nefertiti.
Unlike other deities, the god Aten does not incarnate as either a man or an animal. He takes the abstract form of the disk, and the only element that still recalls a man is the hands, and his hands extend the breath of life. And then it is the king who is responsible for redistributing life to human beings.
Nefertiti truly embraced the cult of Aten. She is seen extremely involved in all the ceremonies. Moreover, she herself holds a prominent place in this cult. She always accompanies her husband in all the depictions we have of them during religious services.
These new reliefs also reveal another aspect of this reform. Now, the sublime Nefertiti and the young Amenhotep IV are no longer just the representatives of the god, but his true incarnation on earth.
When you see me, you see Aten. When you pray to me, you pray to Aten. I, Amenhotep, and I, Nefertiti, are the only ones capable for you, the Egyptian, of giving you what you want. They are, in a way, the divine incarnation that allows Egypt simply to live.
By becoming gods themselves, no one is able to challenge their order or authority. They are literally above all human beings.
Once their new status is declared, the royal couple decides to create an unprecedented place to honor their deity. It is at the gates of the Holy of Holies of Amun, the Temple of Karnak, that they choose to build this sanctuary. Under the eyes of a powerless clergy, Nefertiti and Amenhotep IV once again revolutionize all traditions.
From now on, the temples of Aten are formed by a succession of open-air courtyards. So, these are halls that follow one another with numerous altars. It is a complete upheaval of architecture in the history of Egypt.
To make his newfound devotion evident to the people, the pharaoh also decides to change his name. An exceptional act in Egyptian history.
The name of Amenhotep IV means Amun is at peace. So it was absolutely illogical for him to continue bearing this name in total contradiction with the new ideology. Therefore, Amenhotep is replaced by Akhenaton, which means he is beneficial or he is useful to Aten. So here we clearly have the assertion of the importance of this god who is the sole protector from then on of the pharaoh.
Gradually, and then more and more rapidly, the traditional ancient gods of Egypt is somewhat erased one by one to make way for this promise. I would say that one could already cautiously qualify it as monotheistic, that is, the worship of a single god, the principle of all existence.
At that moment, they begin to ban the god Amun, meaning they start sending teams throughout Egypt to chisel away the effigies and mentions of the name of the former tutelary deity of Egyptian royalty, the god Amun.
A campaign that did not spare the old emblems of Thebes, the religious capital, starting with the Temple of Luxor, even though it was built by Akhenaton's own father. The cartouches of Amenhotep III are erased. The new sovereign no longer wants to refer to the now banned gods. Worse still, he decides to attack the very temple of Amun at Karnak. Scars mostly restored since, but some traces still remain today.
Akhenaton did not spare his efforts to have the images of Amun chiseled away. What we see, for example, on this obelisk, the image of the god has been chiseled away by his agents, and it is the same on the obelisk north of Karnak, where he sent his agents more than 20 meters high to chisel away the images of Amun up to the top. That is to say, he completely eradicated the images of this god in his temple at Karnak.
The separation from the clergy of Amun, since Amun is no longer a worshipped deity under Akhenaton's reign, is a way of telling them they no longer have any power. So Akhenaton now rules alone.
The royal couple decides to go even further. To free themselves definitively from Amun and his priests, they choose to leave Thebes and establish a new capital on the banks of the Nile, in the heart of the Egyptian desert. We are in the 5th year of the reign of Nefertiti and Akhenaton. The pharaoh, accompanied by his high dignitaries, is searching in the middle of the desert for a new territory to settle.
Akhenaton decides to lay the foundations of a new capital. He can no longer live in Thebes. He decides to establish his capital in the heart of Egypt, on the site of Amarna, which he will name Akhenaton, meaning the horizon of Aten.
A capital whose king marks the boundaries with landmarks, unique in all of Egyptian history. 14 stelae that provide many exceptional details about the genesis of this new city desired by the royal couple.
This boundary stela was carved directly into the rock. It is flanked on both sides by representations of the royal couple, and the stela itself is engraved with lines of text, topped by a depiction of the god Aten, who bestows his rays upon the royal couple, Akhenaton and Nefertiti.
Under these representations, in the rock several meters high, the pharaoh has a true decree engraved, hieroglyphs that reveal the new ambitions of the beautiful Nefertiti and the king.
We really get the impression that these inscriptions were engraved high up in the mountain, so that they would be clearly visible to everyone, and the message clearly displayed by Akhenaton and Nefertiti could be shown to the population.
In the foundation decree that the king decides to build at this location, he specifies that he is not taking this territory from anyone, neither a god nor a human, and it is even the king's objective to use a virgin territory to dedicate it entirely to his new deity, the god of light, Aten.
The royal couple immediately sets to work and orders the construction of numerous sanctuaries to honor their god. These few remains reveal the location of one of the first temples dedicated to Aten, but the archaeological excavations also uncover a much larger architectural project at the site now called Tel El Amarna.
Tel El Amarna is mainly a palace. The palace and everything that allows this palace to function. So it's much closer to Versailles than to Paris. It's the place where the king resides, with everything needed for the management to sustain a palace.
The residences of dignitaries, officials, soldiers, and artists must be arranged. So really, it's a city, an important capital that must be built in record time.
What is fascinating is that this city was born from the desert. After 4 years of construction, this city was capable of accommodating more than 20,000 inhabitants.
In this new capital, Nefertiti and Akhenaton set up sumptuous palaces, a royal residence whose traces can be found today in the northern part of the city. Remains that allow us to imagine the splendor of the king and queen's apartments.
The site of Amarna had 3 different palaces. This specific palace might have belonged to the great royal wife, Nefertiti. This courtyard was likely organized around a pool and various plantings. There were probably different trees, palm trees, etc. There was also this large colonnade that framed it, along with private apartments. One can imagine it as a kind of ornamental pool, a place where one could rest, sheltered from the sun of the god Aten.
One can imagine Nefertiti's palace with places for the children, areas for the servants, bathrooms, ceremonial halls, reception rooms, since the queen can receive guests in her palace.
An independent life, away from her husband. As royal custom dictates, the couple does not live together. Each has their own palace, a true distinction of powers.
Akhenaton had a palace even further north. Simply, they are separated by 700 meters. To connect them, they used the royal road, which was then used to perform all the daily rituals and to move along the city of Amarna.
This allows for a whole staging because the king and queen make trips back and forth between these 2 palaces. It also allows them to show themselves at least twice a day to their subjects. We have depictions, Akhenaton and Nefertiti, each standing on their own chariot like stars, following the main axis in this new capital that connects the palaces.
These daily appearances allow the people to worship their sovereign. The royal couple is also depicted on all the walls of the city.
On all the reliefs of public buildings, we see the pharaoh, the queen, who are always somehow blessed by this solar disk, Aten, which is above them.
Images of the sovereigns that mark a notable change in Egyptian art. Breaking with the past in the always identical representations of pharaohs, Akhenaton and Nefertiti choose to innovate. They depict themselves for posterity with a new and most unusual physique.
His face is very astonishing. He has almond-shaped eyes, a full mouth, a prominent chin, a sort of horse-like jaw. His body is also a bit deformed. Well, he has breasts. He also has a belly that spills over his belt. We clearly have here androgynous representations.
Nefertiti, in her representations, in her statuary, have almost identical features, to the point where she can no longer be distinguished from her husband.
The goal is to ensure that anyone who sees these reliefs immediately recognizes the pharaonic family and can also recognize this cultural revolution that is being initiated. And indeed, he succeeded very well, since even today, Amarna art is easily recognized.
The situation also changes in the way that Nefertiti presents herself to the people. She no longer wears what the former queens of Egypt wore.
She is dressed in very fine linen clothes that were woven especially for the king, so they were almost transparent, with beautiful pleats that highlight the sovereign's figure.
An appearance laden with symbolism, which the queen and the pharaoh further exalt with dazzling jewelry.
Like the pharaoh wears the large pectoral, which is one of the insignias, I would say, of his reign and status. Well, Nefertiti, similarly, wears the same adornments.
So one must imagine pectoral plates with the name of the king and queen, with hieroglyphs made in different stones, small figures in lapis lazuli, with turquoise, carnelian, in a very delicate art.
It was also customary to wear bracelets on the wrist, sometimes also on the upper arms, earrings too, and gold rings. So it is also the work of goldsmiths that makes these jewels particularly precious.
This expertise, over 3,000 years old, continues to inspire the greatest creators today. In the 1920s, jeweler Louis Cartier incorporated this fascinating Egyptian iconography into his most refined jewelry.
Here then, we see a brooch made from an authentic Egyptian element, a depiction of a smiling Isis, which was transformed in 1927 into this very lovely piece of jewelry, with some emerald and ruby accents to highlight the material of the depiction of Isis in this brooch. I think that the depth of the symbols conveyed by Egyptian culture is still there, continues to fascinate, and is found in contemporary creations, in our creative language.
A creativity at its peak during the time of Akhenaton. The excavations of the ancient villas intended for the nobles allow for a better imagination of the unparalleled and sumptuous luxury of this new Egyptian capital.
The Egyptian nobility reached a degree of sophistication and refinement rarely equaled. It is about celebrating Aten, not in austerity, but rather in beauty. And this beauty must be manifested daily. The court smells good, the court is beautiful, the court eats infinitely delicate dishes on a daily basis.
A refined gastronomy from which the tombs can provide us with valuable details. On the walls of Mena's tomb, scenes of rare quality reveal the culinary customs of ancient Egypt.
What is interesting about these paintings is that they show us, for example, different products. Not all, but some products that existed at the time. Fish, for example, is very abundant in the Nile. There are also fruits and vegetables, dates or grapes, bread, eggs.
At the time, people also really liked ducks, grilled wild ducks. That was a very renowned dish. And then they drank a lot of wine, apparently of high quality, probably quite expensive, because the common people drank very little of it, if at all, so it was really the drink of the rich.
The people are almost vegetarian, so they will mainly eat bread and beer, which are the staple foods. Meat, on the other hand, is reserved for the aristocracy, and especially the pharaonic family.
In Amarna, these dishes are even glorified for the first time by the royal family. This is evidenced by the depiction of a princess joyfully devouring her duck, an innocuous image that nonetheless carries a highly symbolic religious message.
There is truly a desire to show the daily life of the rulers, and it makes sense because they are almost divine themselves. And so, they are shown in their life exactly as one would have shown the representations of the gods in their daily life in the past. Life in Akhenaton is a little different from the rest of Egypt. We are in a very particular period where the pleasures of life, of the everyday, are emphasised more. The important thing is to enjoy every moment.
These everyday pleasures are depicted on most of the brick walls of the new capital. Small evocative scenes that, like a comic strip, inform us about daily life around the palace. They are called talatats.
We can notably see scenes taking place here in a bakery. So we really have the kneading of the bread up to its storage and then its transport. We also have scenes with potters, other scenes with carpenters that allow us to better understand daily life in the time of Akhenaton.
That said, if we have many representations of daily life, they are ideological representations, meaning it is difficult to know what everyday life was really like, especially for the lower social classes, which were obviously far from being as idyllic as this dream life displayed by the rulers, or possibly also by the notables.
Love, tenderness, intimacy between Nefertiti and the king is also displayed repeatedly on the walls, a novelty concerning a queen and a king.
We see, for example, against all expectations, Nefertiti bringing her hand to her husband's chin, taking his face as if she were going to kiss him on the mouth.
We have several scenes where Akhenaton kisses Nefertiti.
The art of Amarna depicts a very united, loving couple, but in reality, we do not really know what was happening. Today, we can only see what the royal couple wanted to highlight about their life.
This message is ultimately addressed to all of Egypt. Be happy because we are. And we give you this happiness that comes through the worship of Aten. Pray to Aten, and you will be happy.
7 children are born from this seemingly cloudless union, including 6 little girls, all of whom have names related to the god Aten. Children often depicted alongside their parents.
We see them constantly in everyday life scenes, very tender. Furthermore, we see the 2 parents with their little daughters. We see Nefertiti holding one of her children in her arms, like a little baby she's rocking. We feel like we can truly access their daily life and almost sense the love that prevails in this family. All the princesses are depicted with the same hairstyle. The hair is gathered on the side in the form of a ponytail or braid that hangs down.
Until then, it was mostly princes who wore this lock. But initially, Akhenaton and Nefertiti only had daughters, so the daughters are considered here somewhat like princes, hence this lock that designates them as legitimate heirs.
Princesses considered equal to an heir, a sovereign Nefertiti as powerful as her husband. The status of women in Egypt remains a unique case in antiquity.
What makes Egypt unique is that the status of women there is particularly modern for the time. We are in 1300 before Christ, and women enjoy a certain freedom. They can choose their husband, they can divorce, they can work for the majority of them. So they have a status that is very different from the rest of what is found at the time.
But they are still in an inferior position to their husbands because they have an absolute duty of fidelity. You know, an unfaithful woman can be sentenced to death.
And the men complicit in adultery could be thrown to the crocodile. So once again, these are extremely severe punishments. But most of the time, in cases of adultery, everything ended in a divorce.
If fidelity is required, eroticism and fantasy are also part of the daily life of the Egyptians in Amarna.
What is quite remarkable in the time of Akhenaton is the women's costumes, where it is very clear that sensuality is highlighted and exalted. The women have very, very generous forms, and they are dressed in extremely light veils.
In general, the religion of Aten is quite optimistic. People enjoy the pleasures of daily life, and eroticism is naturally present. In fact, the Egyptians had this lovely expression that said, "Make a happy day," to mean that they had made love.
We have a certain number of erotic, even pornographic, Egyptian documents, like the famous Turin Papyrus, which depicts sometimes very acrobatic scenes.
with male partners who are quite deformed and with hypertrophied sexual attributes, and women who always seem a little passive.
These are more like fantasies being represented, you know. That said, sexuality is very, very present in Egyptian myths and religion. Female pleasure is mentioned, but it is still always linked to procreation. That is to say, eroticism is still connected to making children.
If procreation is a goal, there are nevertheless many means of contraception.
There were notably pessaries, which were a kind of medical tampon inserted deep into the vagina and contained various products intended to prevent conception. These pessaries notably included crocodile dung, rich in vitamins E and A, with moisturizing properties, but especially honey that prevented the progression of sperm.
Contraception is practiced only by the poor, those who cannot provide for children. That said, Nefertiti does not resort to contraception since her goal is to do everything to have as many pregnancies and children as possible.
Incarnation of Aten, goddess on earth. Nefertiti must also be the most beautiful. Hygiene and care given to her body are part of a true ritual, equal to that rendered to the solar disk.
She goes to wash, crouched on a reed mat, her servants around her to pour water over her body, somewhat like our current showers. And this water is mixed with natron, which is a mineral composed, among other things, of sodium bicarbonate, which helps to lighten the skin. Nefertiti, this queen of the south, with her slightly dark skin, seeks to lighten her complexion with this water mixed with natron. Egyptians' teeth are in very good condition, as observed in any case on the mummies. So the Egyptians take great care of their teeth. First with sticks somewhat like this one, which allows, if you will, to remove all the food that might have remained in the teeth. And then by meticulous brushing and rinsing with water mixed with natron to whiten the teeth.
Apart from cleanliness, the obsession of the queen, but also of all Egyptians, is the daily removal of hair.
Hairs reminds of animality, and that it is necessary to distance oneself from it to be human. So, the Egyptians practiced hair removal intensively, and the higher one was in the social strata, the more it was practiced, to the point where there was not a single hair left on the body. They removed it entirely.
It's really about removing hair, using tweezers that were found in the tombs of nobles from that time, for both aesthetic and hygienic reasons, as it helps avoid lice and parasites. And then they wore wigs since the head is shaved.
Wigs were often quite large to protect from the sun. They replaced hats in a certain way. These wigs were of very high quality in the aristocracy, often made of natural hair, and in the lower social classes, wigs were also found in other materials like wool or horsehair.
So when a woman wants to seduce, she puts on a wig.
To please, the eyes and eyebrows are also highlighted. Made up, the gaze extends infinitely, like a mirror of the gods.
The essential of Nefertiti's makeup is this ancient technique of kohl. It was about protecting oneself from both the sand and the sun. Let's not forget that everything is plucked, so the eye is bare. So the kohl acts like a sort of sunglasses, if you will, since this thick black line protected the pupil from the sun's rays. And also, as it was an antiseptic, it acted like an eye wash against any dirt that might get into the eye. So, they also applied makeup that was blue in color, because blue was a very positive color, the color of eternity, immortality, and thus divinity.
The beauty-related objects available to the queen and wealthy Egyptian women are numerous. Sculpted mirrors, delicate combs, finely decorated ointment containers. Refined, yet they are part of everyday life. One of the most evocative is displayed at the Louvre Museum. A makeup spoon in the shape of a duck presented by a delicate and sensual swimmer.
Aesthetics are fundamental in Egyptian culture. It's even much more prevalent than in other cultures of the same era. It is truly part of daily life. It is a necessity to be beautiful and to take care of oneself. And it also has a religious dimension because it is necessary to keep a beautiful body in good shape to symbolically preserve it in the afterlife.
The end of the reign of Nefertiti and Akhenaton is, unfortunately, marked by a series of deaths that affect the royal family.
3 of the 6 little princesses die, certainly in childbirth, and perhaps obviously from illness. And there, the royal couple's grief is immense.
These royal children are buried, as we know, in chambers parallel to the royal tomb at Amarna, on the site of Amarna, where special galleries are excavated to accommodate them.
Damaged frescoes, but still present in the vault arranged by the royal couple, immortalize this painful moment, that of the loss of a child, the inconsolable grief.
This relief actually depicts the royal couple Akhenaton and Nefertiti in a mourning scene. We can see here that they are both shown leaning. Here, we can better see the image of Nefertiti with her distinctive hairstyle. And in front of them, there is this bed on which the body of one of their little daughters was laid. This is the first time we truly see the royal couple display mourning, along with the entire royal family.
Nefertiti's grief bursts forth for all of Egypt to see. Yes, I, a goddess, weep for the loss of my daughters. To see a pharaoh cry, to see a queen cry, in Egypt, it has never been seen.
Another family pillar who disappears at the same time, the Queen Mother, Tia, anew immense sorrow in the hearts of Akhenaton and Nefertiti. She is also buried in the royal tomb of Amarna.
This epidemic of deaths is quite surprising. Excavations at the Amarna site show that there was a very high mortality rate, and converging evidence indicates that the plague was rampant in Amarna.
Obviously, this did not serve Akhenaton. These deaths are catastrophic. Well, at a push, Queen Tai was over 60 years old, why not? But still, the 3 princesses were very young. They are supposed to be protected by Aten, who is present in their name. So it's a kind of denial in total contradiction with the official ideology.
It can only be felt as, I would say, a kind of divine punishment. And we can imagine that it's the gods who have been abandoned that are seeking revenge.
To stop these divine plague epidemics, the Egyptian doctors are completely powerless, yet their expertise is renowned throughout the Middle East.
There is an Egyptian medicine at the time that is very advanced. A certain number of priests, in particular, are priest-doctors. Often, the diagnoses are good, meaning there is quite a good understanding of the human body, but the remedies proposed are sometimes completely absurd. Animal excrements are used a lot, like hippopotamus dung, fly droppings, or crocodile excrements, which are applied to wounds, likely causing further infection.
The Egyptians believed that this negative element would act like a magnet and draw out the negative breaths that disturbed the body's balance.
Apart from these unappetizing remedies, the lack of understanding of the role of the main human organs makes the practice of medicine quite uncertain.
For example, they completely deny the brain. The brain does not exist. Between the ears, there is nothing but emptiness. On the other hand, the heart is the center of everything. It is the center of the soul. It is the center of consciousness. It is the center of emotions. It is the heart, ultimately, that allows the whole human being to live, to breathe, to suffer, to be happy, and so on.
Plus, there's not much difference between medicine and magic.
Often, unfortunately, the patient dies. Since the beginning of ancient Egypt, kings and queens have made it a habit to build necropolises in the shape of pyramids, the symbol of the soul's ascent to the sky. Yet, in the 18th dynasty, that of Akhenaton's ancestors, everything changes.
The pyramids were replaced by underground funerary apartments called hypogea, with galleries and funerary chambers, perhaps to make them a bit more discreet and to prevent looting, as there were tomb raiders since antiquity.
That's when they start building what will become the famous Valley of the Kings, which is a valley at the foot of a mountain that resembles a natural pyramid, where each ruler will have a tomb dug that goes deep into this valley.
The idea is to hide inside the mountain, which is more or less deified, associated with the goddess Hathor.
In line with their spiritual break, Akhenaton and his very beautiful wife Nefertiti choose to leave this Valley of the Kings near Thebes. New necropolises are dug near Amarna, those of the royal family, but also those of wealthy dignitaries serving the king. A radical change that does not affect one of the ancestral funeral rites, mummification.
To be reborn in the afterlife, to access paradise, it is absolutely necessary to preserve the corpse in good condition. This explains the ritual of mummification, so important to the Egyptians.
The priests begin by washing the body and removing its hair. Then, they remove the various organs from the body, starting with the brain.
The brain was removed through the nose by inserting bronze hooks through the nostrils, which were probably twisted to turn the brain into mush.
The embalmers then open the abdomen on the left side to remove the viscera, the stomach, the lungs, the liver, and the intestines. The heart, however, remains in place. Once the embalmers had removed the viscera, they placed them in jars called canopic jars.
Then, the corpse was placed in a natron bath, which is basically a salt bath, to dry it out.
Once this operation is completed, the embalmers proceeded to wrap the mummy in bandages. Between the bandages, the embalmers slipped protective amulets that served to watch over the deceased. The head of this mummy shows that, after much trials and errors, the Egyptians had reached a quite astonishing level of sophistication in mummifying the deceased. It almost seems like the dead is about to rise and walk.
Long and costly, these rituals are performed only for the wealthiest or the royal family.
There is total social inequality in Egypt, in life and also in death. The pharaohs have several successive sarcophagi, gilded wooden sarcophagi, even solid gold sarcophagi. Then these nested sarcophagi were placed in a stone coffin.
Indestructible, the sarcophagi are often engraved with legends of the gods, like that of Pharaoh Amenhotep II, great-grandfather of Akhenaton, buried in the Valley of the Kings.
The mummy, placed in these nested coffins, is accompanied by a whole funerary set.
Surrounding the deceased with these fetish objects ensures that in the afterlife, the immortal soul will continue to live surrounded by familiar objects as if the individual was still alive.
The goal of Egyptian funerary practices was actually to replicate the pleasures of the earthly life, which clearly shows that the Egyptians were not morbid beings obsessed with death, but rather obsessed with the idea of continuing the benefits of life on earth.
We are in a chapel of Anubis. Anubis, who is a funerary god with a dog's head. The god Osiris, the god Anubis, all these deities that favored the rebirth of the dead disappeared. From now on, funeral beliefs revolve around Aten.
Immortality is replaced by survival in the memory of the living, all dedicated to the worship of the solar disk and its light.
This simplification of representations of death for the Egyptians must have seemed to them like a true impoverishment.
The Egyptians were beginning to doubt. It's too intellectual, it's too distant, and above all, it's too foreign to their true faith, and, I would say, especially to their true character.
While the people are plagued by uncertainties, 2 years after the death of her 3 daughters, Nefertiti suddenly withdraws from the court and the life of her husband.
Nefertiti is present until year 16, that is, the last year of the reign of Amenhotep IV or Akhenaton, and then she completely disappears from our records.
Was she a victim of the plague? Mystery. Did she die because she was murdered, I would say, as part of a plot or revenge? Mystery. Did she die suddenly if she was still a young woman? Mystery. What is known is that indeed, she completely disappears from the public scene.
She was about 26 or 27 years old. Akhenaton then married his own daughter, Meritaten, who was 12 or 13 years old, and she becomes great royal wife for only a few months, since the king also dies in year 17, just a few months after Nefertiti.
Upon the death of the pharaoh, it is his daughter and great wife, Meritaten, who succeeds him. A short reign, as she disappears in turn 3 years later. It is then her young brother's turn to ascend the throne, a child king of 9 years named Tutankhaten.
He is the last child, as we now know, of the royal couple Akhenaton and Nefertiti. He is very likely advised by Nefertiti's father.
And I, without too many scruples, declared that the chaos caused by the last pharaoh must come to an end. Let's return to the beliefs, the ancestral customs, and restore to Amun and all the gods of Egypt the place that is rightfully theirs, that is, the first. Gradually, this influence significantly turned this little pharaoh away from his parents' gods. And Tutankhaten gradually and permanently becomes Tutankhamun.
He returns to the royal residence around the site of Thebes in present-day Luxor, where the stronghold of the god Amun is located, and quite naturally decides to be buried in the Valley of the Kings, but also to have his family members reburied in this Valley of the Kings.
It is a gesture that is directed at all of Egypt. It's a way to say, I want to reconnect with the customs. I want to reconnect with the rites. We need to put an end to this interlude, which we no longer understand.
It is therefore in the Valley of the Kings, in a makeshift tomb, that the young pharaoh Tutankhamun reburied his father, a necropolis known today as KV 55.
The tomb K555 was discovered in 1907 with a partially mutilated sarcophagus inside. And inside this coffin a mummy or more, the bones that remain of Akhenaton. Very curiously, all the royal names were mutilated. So they buried a king and then his name was removed.
He is this heretic pharaoh. This pharaoh who must be erased from the memory of men. He is the man who dared to oppose the gods and the man who burns in hell.
If it is discovered that Nefertiti is repeatedly depicted on her husband's royal sarcophagus, no trace of her remains is found. About 100 meters away, another tomb, quite mysterious, proves to be rich in revelations. It is that of Akhenaton's great-grandfather, Pharaoh Amenhotep II.
In the burial chamber of Amenhotep II, there is Amenhotep II in his sarcophagus and 2 sealed rooms, 2 annexes of the tomb, with 6 royal mummies on one side and 3 anonymous mummies on the other side, a mummy of an elderly woman, a mummy of a young woman, and a mummy of a prince.
These 2 mummies of women were aligned next to each other. The one that appears older has long, perfectly preserved, splendid hair, while the other has a shaved head. Moreover, she suffered post-mortem damage that partially disfigured her as part of her jaw was torn off.
We knew they were royal mummies, but their attribution was uncertain since there are generally no inscriptions accompanying these mummies to help us identify them.
Recently, DNA analyses were conducted on these mummies, which identified the elderly woman as Queen Tai. And the young woman as the mother of Tutankhamun, a very close relative of Akhenaton, his cousin Nefertiti.
When Nefertiti's mummy is discovered, the shock is immense. One cannot help but think that they are gazing upon what remains of the most beautiful woman of antiquity.
A beauty now vanished, names that inspire dreams. Little remains of Nefertiti and her husband Akhenaten, except perhaps their insane desire to change a world they inherited in the name of an intuition.
This extraordinary, exceptional parenthesis is just a dream. This dream was gradually eroded by the desert sand that covered this vision of 2 living beings and this extraordinary monotheistic project. From this dream, from this incredible and inspired, so luminous parenthesis, only ruins remain, still visible today at Amarna.